Welcome to the Run Your Day podcast, a show dedicated to helping you expand your capacity, take your life in every area to an entirely new level, and creating a day and a life by design. Here's your host, Dan Hafner. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Run Your Day podcast. As always, your host, Dan Hafner here. I am joined by Tricia Silverman here, who is a nutritionist and award-winning and Amazon International best-selling author of Healthy Dividends, Investments in Nutrition, Movement, and Healthy Habits that Pay Off. She's a registered dietitian, fitness instructor, and wellness coach, and I'm very excited to have her on the show. And we are going to have quite an episode for you here. So, Tricia, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, thank you so much, Dan, for having me here. I am Tricia, your nutritionist for the next half hour that we have together. And I am a wellness coach and a fitness instructor besides being a dietitian. And I teach healthy aging and nutrition entrepreneurship at Northeastern University. And I travel around the country pre-COVID anyway, teaching at fitness conferences. And I also have been in Canada teaching at a couple of fitness conferences out that way over the last few years. So really excited to be here and to chat with you and talk anything nutrition.
Yeah, I'm excited. My side note, my sister's actually a registered dietitian. Shout out to her.
Oh.
She's listening to this. So,
It's
yeah,
so cool.
Yeah, this will be fun. So you mentioned pre-COVID, all the different things, traveling around to that. How has that changed for you?
It was very interesting. I was really scared early on what was going to happen to my business because I'm an entrepreneur. And years ago, I decided not to have all my eggs in one basket. And I needed to create many different baskets. And that paid off for me during this time because I coach, I work at the university, and I speak at conferences and I speak for employee wellness, and I have different client groups. So I got scared in the beginning that, what is all this going to fall apart? But because I had my eggs and the book came out, so that was another kind of basket. And I worked harder than I've ever worked in my life when COVID happened so my business didn't fall apart. I was working days, nights, burning the candle at both ends, and also working weekends to stay afloat.
Wow.
And I've been busier than I've ever been. And I've been fortunate and I'm very grateful for that. But it's been a scary time. And a lot of my friends who are in the fitness professional world lost their jobs right away, and they're recreating themselves online, and it's so hard. So I feel for everyone who's been dealing with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to come on. I'm not for what you just said, but because you're, an entrepreneur coach and fitness coach, which kind of ties in nicely with this whole theme of the Run Your Day show. But let's talk a little bit about your book. It's called Healthy Dividends, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, you say that your book can help people live like a longer life. So what suggestions do you actually include in there for living longer?
Well, it's a great question. And I've looked at, through working at Northeastern, teaching the healthy class or healthy aging course, I've looked at cultures across the world that are known for longevity, like Okinawa, like the Mediterranean region. And there's some that are not as well known, like Vilcabamba in Ecuador and Hunza in northern Pakistan and Abkhazia in the former Soviet Union. And these areas have people that live very long lives, but they don't have the cancer and heart disease rates and the diabetes and Alzheimer's that we have in our country. We actually have a longevity culture, also known as a blue zone in the United States, and that's Loma Linda, California. I was lucky to have visited there, but I'm intrigued by people living long lives. And when you look at those cultures, one thing they all have in common is eating lots of vegetables. So we want to think about when we make meals, when we eat, are we getting in vegetables, and trying to get half of your plate as vegetables at lunch and dinner. And once you get doing that, if you're not already doing that, that should be where we start. but then think about, can you incorporate them into your snacks if you're not doing that already? And in Abkhazia, they actually have salad for breakfast with the cornmeal porridge. And their porridge, it's another word for like our oatmeal. You know, we could have oatmeal in the morning, but many people don't think about vegetables for breakfast, but it's something we can do. And it can be as easy as putting spinach in your smoothie. And, you know, why not have a salad with your breakfast, or leftover vegetables from dinner, or if you're eating eggs, you know, put some vegetables in there. So vegetables are really key. Another one that's interesting, beans. You see beans, you know, across all of these cultures, and beans are certainly a food of longevity, and they have a lot of micronutrients that fuel your health, fuel a healthy mind, fuel healthy skin. And many people just aren't even, maybe they're not eating beans at all, or just not getting enough. So we do want to get them in. And by beans, I mean all kinds of beans. So lentils, cannellini beans, black beans, pigeon peas. And many of my fitness friends like to follow the paleo way of eating. And I think when people go paleo, they clean up their diets, and I'm grateful for that. And if they're eating more fish, great. But we do want to limit the red meat to live a longer life, and replace some of the red meat with beans in your diet. So too much red meat is associated with early mortality when you look at large studies. And unprocessed meat is, well, processed meat is a little, you're worse off than unprocessed meat. So if you are going to do red meat, do the unprocessed meat, move away from the hot dogs and cold cuts and sausages and things like that. But the vegetables key, and beans. And then aside from nutrition, and there's many more things we can do for nutrition, eating more fruit in your diet. There's other things that are associated with longevity, like having a purpose. That's really key. And, you know, in COVID time, it's tough for people. And if you lose your job, it's good to, you know, find a purpose. And maybe that's calling up people and sharing bits of joy, bits of kindness, however you can. And I think it's key to just try to keep it as positive as you can, because that's another longevity factor, in addition with purpose. And it kind of goes hand in hand with being more positive, but being more positive is associated with longevity. So we need to do things to kind of stay uplifted.
Wow, very, very interesting. So that kind of leads into my next question, but before I go there, just a side note, I never thought about a salad for breakfast.
I know, isn't that
But it's funny
interesting?
you say that, because that's actually one thing. When I started down like this whole path, I was introduced to the concept of a green smoothie,
Uh-huh.
which has forever changed my life. I've done so many
Great.
different combinations of it, like from just actual spinach and bananas and kiwi and strawberry, to like pre-made ones, to like stuff ones you buy in the store that probably have too much sugar, but like all kinds of different stuff. But either way, just um, never had a salad for breakfast. But with the green smoothie game, I'm all in on that. I do love that. So that's cool. But I mean, you mentioned something too, which kind of led me into the next one. Was, you know, what do you feel like? How do you feel about like the keto diets and like intermittent fasting and stuff like that? You mentioned the paleo diet, but what do you think about those?
Well, that's a fascinating question. I like the intermittent fasting. I think that it shows a lot of promise. Of course, I think more research needs to be done on it. Being the dietitian side of me is always looking for more research. But I have read an interesting study out of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, on intermittent fasting and older adults, and just looking at, there's different fasting protocols. And I think that the time restricted feeding is really interesting. And there seems to be a lot of good results when you can stretch the time out between your last meal at night and when you eat again the next day. And so I think it's really interesting. I think I have I meet clients where they're at and help them. However, I take an individual approach for everyone. One of my clients, has been doing really well with intermittent fasting. So great. But I have another client who's vegetarian, and I have other, my clients run the gamut of how to get healthy. But what I find with intermittent fasting that's really crucial is that when you do eat, you're eating healthy food. Now, if you're doing intermittent fasting and you're combining it with keto, I don't agree with that. I think that keto has its place for people who have epilepsy, which that's where the research is on keto diet. But the reason I don't like it is we don't know the long-term effects. And when you look across the world at different cultures who live long lives, no one's eating the keto diet. In fact, no cultures have been eating the keto diet for hundreds of years, for even 50 years. We don't know any cultures, like populations, that eat that way. So the people that are doing that are guinea pigs. And I'm concerned about long-term health. From all the research that I've read, and I've actually written a nutrition for active aging certification for a fitness company, and I read tons of studies when I came up with that manual. Unsaturated fats are the best fats for your brain as you age, for a healthy brain long term. Saturated fat is associated with inflammation, and red meat has saturated fat. So we want to be really careful, as I mentioned, with the red meat. But even if, let's say, you're on keto and you're like, I'm going to eat extra virgin olive oil and avocados and just good fats. Well, as dietitians, sometimes we simplify things a little too much. And when we talk about extra virgin olive oil, we call it a monounsaturated fat. But when you look closely at the label, you'll see there's some saturated fat in there. So if you're only doing what you think are healthy fats, eventually it'll be too much saturated fat. And then that's where we can start amping up the inflammation that we don't need, especially during this time of COVID. You don't want to be eating all of that fat and then not be getting enough fruit. Fruit helps to protect your immune system. And that's, another thing I worry about, that real low fruit. I recommend at least 3 servings of fruit a day and getting different colors of fruit. So not everyone can see that, but you can in the back of my kitchen here. And this has been my workplace now for the last few months. I have a rainbow poster, and that's when I do my employee wellness and conference presentations. My poster is always up there to remind people to eat the rainbow. And if you're doing keto diet, you're not getting the rainbow of fruit. It's very, very low in fruit, the keto style of eating. And I worry about that, and not enough fruit and too much fat. And I also worry because if people are telling, like trainers are telling people to eat this way, it's not within the scope of when you look at the National Academy of Sciences and you look at the percentages of macronutrients. So I think for many reasons, I'm not a fan. Also for athletic performance, the research is not in favor of the keto diet. When you look at a large amount of evidence is against the keto diet in terms of athletic performance. There are some studies that may support it, but we need many more studies, but most of the studies do not support a keto diet for athletic performance.
That's interesting. And you mentioned something that I kind of wanted to touch on too, is like the word fad that caught my attention, right? Because, I think there's a mix between, like, in our world today, everyone wants to be on the next fad and the next thing, like the next TikTok type thing, right?
Right.
But it's interesting, like what you said, there's not a lot of places around that you've seen that have done something similar to the keto diet for a long time. And that just kind of, there's a lack of empirical evidence. Like I don't really care either way. You're the expert here, but that's interesting, because that's like one thing I've been talking about lately, is like that concept of consistency, and
Yes.
and that kind of ties in with that. So that's interesting. I'm glad you offered your take on that. So an interesting question here. I was doing a little bit of research, and I came across something on your site. And can you tell us here a little bit more about, I hope I'm saying it right, frankenfoods? What is a
Yeah,
frankenfood?
that is so funny. Yeah, so frankenfood is food that you can't grow on your own. So for an example that you don't want to eat, um, one of the popular restaurants came out with a quesadilla burger, and it's combining like two things that really normally wouldn't go together. So I call it a frankenfood. Or I saw a 7-Up cake that people, and you can't grow 7-Up on a tree. And
What?
you can't, you can't grow Oreos on a tree. So I call frankenfoods these junky foods that have too much sugar, too much salt, too much fat, and they're foods that we just can't. You don't get them from nature. Maybe Keebler you can grow a cookie, so I might have to give them that. But for the other, all these other frankenfoods, it's just junky food. And when you look at the food additives, uh, for example, BHT is butylated hydroxytoluene, used as a preservative, and that is banned in the EU, but we use it here. And it's in foods like Chex Mix, Light cereal, and on Triscuit you'll see that it's added to the packaging. Well, if the food's rubbing against the packaging, you're going to get some on there. And it's in most gum. And gum is one of the biggest frankenfoods too. I call gum is like a witch's brew of nasty ingredients. And BHT is one of those ingredients often used in gum. And gum companies are very sneaky because they have something called gum base on the label. And they don't want you to know what that is. But if you Google gum base FDA, you'll see interesting things like rubber type of material can be used to make gum. And as a dietitian, and your sister probably would feel the same about this, we never learned how you digest rubber and plastic type of materials. I don't, it perplexes me. Where does that go? How do you absorb that? And yeah, you shouldn't swallow gum. And I remember the rumors when I was a kid, don't swallow the gum. And I think I pretty much believe those rumors because I don't know where it goes. And I hope that we're passing it through and that it becomes, part of your feces. But it's pretty fascinating to me. And now you might think, well, you can't really chew on rubber, but they add a plasticizer to it. And that's you look up gum-based FDA, you'll see approved plasticizers. So they have to add another chemical to make the rubber that you eat chewy. And then some of the gums have almost all the artificial sugars on the market in them. It's unbelievable. And why do they do that? Well, some of these artificial sugars may have an aftertaste, so they put another artificial sugar in to balance that out. But people don't realize the gums, the fancy packaging makes it look good and the cool names of these gums and the cool commercials, but people don't really know what they're eating. And in animal studies, the diet sugars have been associated with cancer. And in diet soda is another frankenfood, because where do we harvest that? I don't know. And diet sodas have been linked with heart attack, stroke, and dementia. And it's shocking to me that these things are even available on the market. And I used to be a diet soda drinker. I just didn't know, like many people just don't know. And I have to say that many people have quit some of these frankenfoods, especially gum. I have an international gum collection from all the gum that I've collected across the US and into Canada, because when people hear about what's in gum, they're just shocked. One lady I wrote about in the book, her name's Julie, and she's from Florida, and she gave up gum after coming to my presentation, and we stayed in touch. And the headaches she had her whole adult life went away. And she went to all kinds of doctors to try to figure it out and gave up gum, no more headaches. I don't know if that's from the aspartame, which is a very junky sugar, if it's artificial sugar, if it's from the aspartame, or if it's just from that chewing motion, from chewing that gum so much, or some kind of combination of the two. But I would say don't eat, try to cut the gum out if you can. And that doesn't go, by the way, I've taught smoking cessation in the past. I am in favor of for a short period of time using the gum for quitting smoking, but that's supposed to be temporary. But other than that, gum, I'm not a fan.
Okay, so if you're quitting smoking, it's okay, but that's unbelievable. I didn't know any of that.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy. And side
It's
note,
crazy.
can you imagine an Oreo tree?
I would love that
Just
tree.
imagine that right now, everybody. Oreos aplenty.
Or, with the genetic engineering and the genetically modified foods, you may see that someday. You really might.
That would be something. That would be
It would
something.
be.
So we got a little bit of time left here. Explain to me how did you get into, how does your entrepreneurship coaching, tie into all of this?
Yeah, so I became an entrepreneur back in, I think we're all entrepreneurs, by the way, at heart. It's just, do we express it? And
Yep.
back in 2000, whoops, sorry about that. Back in 2004, I opened my own company, and I got my MBA looking to learn how to run a company. I don't think you have to get an MBA to be an entrepreneur by any means. I think you can be self-taught. But I did that because I wanted to learn, and it really helped me tremendously. And I just love developing new ideas and helping people out. And in that course that I teach at Northeastern University, I've had many students come through that have gone on to open their own. A lot of them are nutrition businesses, but other businesses as well. And I just love to help people. And I think that it just takes, thinking about a plan. And I think everyone can do it. Like, I think everyone should think about writing a book, especially if you're an entrepreneur. Writing the book has really changed the game for me. And I think that I recommend it in my course so much that it's one of the best things you can do is to write a book. And I've known that for years. Finally, I got mine out last year, but it really has been a game changer. People will hire me much more, much faster than in the past to do a seminar, for example. And I've been employee wellness for years, since 2005, doing employee wellness. And people used to, I'd have a few emails, a few phone calls, and now it's like, it's much faster, maybe one email, maybe, to get the ball rolling, maybe one interview. And it's just surprising to me, but it is and I was told this beforehand, before I wrote it, it's a credibility booster, and it's still the same me, but people just see you in a different light with a book, and it can really boost your business. So for people who are at home, maybe not working so much with COVID, it's a good time to think about writing a book.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. That's actually one thing I haven't really entertained much of that thought, but that might be something that might be on the horizon for me next year. I do tell my wife, I got her for our first anniversary, I did write her a book. It was like a story of our dating life up till we got married. And I got it. It's a physical published book. So I tell her I'm a published author.
You should publish that. You should sell that. You already have it. Your product is,
Yeah, maybe.
wow.
Maybe.
You could, and you could take that, and you could, I love brainstorming, but you can shape that as a guide to help other guys. So it could be almost like a dating or relationship type of book to help other people. There's so many ways it could be turned into a self-help book or a memoir.
Yeah.
You have it. You already wrote it.
Yeah, that's
wow.
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
So. Well, that kind of brings me to another question I wanted to ask, and I always like to ask people that are on the show something a little bit deeper, right? So, you talk about all this different stuff of starting a company and all these different things. So, can you describe your biggest business or life setback and how you overcame it? You might have answered this earlier, but
yeah, it's funny you say that. So I'm going to address the COVID thing again, but just dive deeper into what it takes, and what it takes to, I think, be successful at what you do. And I think it takes grit and extremely hard work. And for whatever you do, for every 10 no's you get, the 11th might be a yes. So like keep plugging away. And you listen to people like Gary Vaynerchuk, and I don't know if you have ever had a chance to listen to him or read his books, but he's very interesting because he talks about how many years it took to become successful. We all just hear his name now. Many people haven't even heard of it yet, but there were many years that took him to get where he needed to be. And for me, it's been many years. And, over the last few years, I've won a few different awards, and I think people start to think, oh, she's lucky, this, that. And some of it is a little bit of luck, but it's hard work. I read a lot of books about actors, and same thing when you read about comedians and actors, that it's many years before they actually get known. And it's just putting in that hard work day after day, working many hours. And I think success doesn't come easy. It often can look easy, but it's the hard work behind the scenes. And I remember seeing a picture of an iceberg, and when you see like a little bit of ice coming out above the water, and if you think that's like someone's success, like, oh, wow, look at that iceberg, but underneath that iceberg is really huge underneath the water. And that's all the hard work that went in. And then people just see kind of what's above the water, but below what took to get to the top of that iceberg was just a lot of hard work and grit and time and sacrifice. And I have, there's been many times I haven't gone out and, have been in on weekends just working. And I think hard work is really key. And that's what I went through with COVID. Has to be, I think, I always thought there were other setbacks in the past, but this has been the biggest setback on one hand. But the way that I worked at it right now, things are going okay, but I'm still working so hard because I don't know what next week or next month will bring, or 2 months from now. So I think the key is grit and keeping yourself really positive. And that's things like meditation, reading positive literature, getting outside for walks, getting some sunshine, drinking enough water is associated with feeling better. So there are a lot of and eating, of course, eating good foods. Salad is a feel-good food, by the way. So all of these things, I think, together can, hopefully anyone listening, this can, help you out and inspire you if you're feeling down around this time.
Yeah, that's great. I could add a lot to that, but I'll just leave it because yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I've as you're sitting there explaining all that, I'm like, yep, I've been through that. I know that's true. Like, but 2 years ago when I started this whole thing, like I'd have been like, okay, yeah, cool, right? But like sometimes you just got to go through that stuff to really appreciate. Like, wow, you're right. Like when you say it takes a lot of hard work, you're not kidding. Like that's true. So.
And podcasts, I give you so much credit. I know there's a lot of work behind that, just learning all the technology and figuring out how to get it all loaded and getting guests and then editing and putting it all together. There's just so much into it. And I think that's a lot. And people, they see the end result and wow, he has a podcast and that's great, not knowing that it's how much work is behind it. And I haven't even done that yet. I've been on them, but I've gone to a couple of sessions at conferences on how to do a podcast. And it's like, wow, there's a lot that you have to know about.
Yeah, I mean it's easier than ever today. I will say that, but then the same goes with you. Like a lot of people will be like, well, that's a coaching business. Like I could do that. That seems pretty straightforward. And then you sit there and just kind of like, well, you haven't seen like all the work that it took to actually build that up too. So I give you props for that for sure.
Thank you. Thank
So.
you very much.
So I guess as we wrap up, just, tell people where they can find you and, how they could, find out more about what you do and just kind of contact you.
Great, thank you. So I am, my website is triciasilverman.com, That's TRICIASILVERMAN.com. I have a free chapter to my book on my website. You can contact me through the website. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook a lot. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So please join me on social media. And it'd be great to stay in touch with you, Dan. I really appreciate you having me on. I think your show is great. I've listened to it and I've learned from it. So I'm excited to listen to even more episodes. And I'm honored to be a guest. And thank you for having me. I appreciate your time and your help in me getting my message out there.
Anytime. You're always welcome. I always like to have, haven't had many people return on the podcast yet, but we're still kind of circling that, so, sometime down the road, the door's always open. So
thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Tricia. It was a pleasure having you on. That is going to be a wrap for this show, everyone. As always, I guess we'll just wrap it up. We don't have to plug anything else. This is Dan Hafner signing off. Make it a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Dan.
Hey, have you ever thought about joining a virtual run challenge? As COVID-19 continues to upend our lives and change our life routines, finding fresh ways to challenge yourself physically can be difficult. I know I'm having trouble with that. It can also be pretty hard to connect with others and find accountability partners for the purpose of fitness as well. That's why we created Runwage Virtual Challenges. Runwage Challenges are a new and exciting way to stay physically active and maintain social distancing. Every challenge takes place 100% online, and you can compete against and engage with runners from all over the world. Best of all, they are the only virtual challenges out there which actually reward participants with real cash. That means you have no excuse for staying inactive during this pandemic. So if you've been looking for a fresh and interesting way to stay active and get your miles in, go to runwageapp.com/virtual challenges to join me and the diverse community of runners already competing. That's runwageapp.com/virtual challenges. Can't wait to see you there.